Welcome to Modern Anarchy, the podcast exploring sex, relationships, and liberation. I'm your host, Nicole.
I tried to keep her quiet, but she's screaming inside of me. I tried to keep her hiding, oh, shut up. I tried to keep her quiet, but she's a wild, wild woman.
On today's episode, we have Leah. Join us for a conversation about the liberation of desire and the future of relationships. Together we talk about how the Disney dream dies, the intensity of paradigm shock, and cheating on the narrative. Hello, dear listener, and welcome back to Modern Anarchy. I am so delighted to have all of you pleasure activists from around the world tuning in for another episode each Wednesday. My name is Nicole. I am a sex and relationship psychotherapist with training in psychedelic integration therapy, and I am also the founder of the Pleasure Practice, supporting individuals in crafting expansive sex lives and intimate relationships. Dear listener, oh, this episode is so good. It honestly changed my life. Leah had recommended reading the book Untrue by Wednesday Martin, which I did do, so thank you, Leah. And wow, that's one of those books you read and you open your eyes and say, wow, I can't go back to that previous consciousness I had before. And so it's definitely a book I recommend to my clients of the Pleasure Practice because there's just so much in there, so much to unlearn about women's desire and sexuality. Before reading this, I had already known that women's desire drops off earlier in long-term monogamous relationships than men, and that's even when you control for variables like relationship satisfaction. So like perfectly happy relationships, but the desire does drop off faster than men, right? And so this book had a lot of content on that really changed my perspective. And so, dear listener, highly recommend. And thank you, Leah, for the recommendation because wow. And yeah, a lot of what we talk about today is the paradigm shock of stepping into non-monogamy. Leah talks about their journey and all of the bumpy and messy, complicated and beautiful aspects of that journey. And I share about mine too, from purity culture to polyamory. That's a pretty big paradigm shock. And yes, as the title of this episode said, I cried a lot. And you know what? I will say it's gone a hell of a lot better, a hell of a lot easier, thanks to extremely secure partners and exposure therapy. And so, you know, I get into all of this in my book, The Psychedelic Jealousy Guide, which is available on modernanarchypodcast.com for free. You can download it, you can read it right there because I believe in free resources. As a psychotherapist, I know how important it is to get out of systemic oppression with poverty and money. And so free resources, it's there for you to read, dear listener. And there's so much to unpack with our set and setting, with cultural beliefs around any relational practice. And the biggest thing that I come back to in my work, in this conversation, in the books that I'm reading is the importance of community. Remembering that the self is formed in relation. And so if you want to change your paradigm, change your community. And then your community will be there to hold you through the shock, right? Your community will be there as you go through that exposure. And your community will then be there to hold you as you laugh and you giggle and you step into all of the pleasure that is possible in that paradigm. All right, dear listener, if you are ready to liberate your pleasure, you can explore my offerings and resources at modernanarchypodcast.com, linked in the show notes below. And I want to say the biggest thank you to all of my Patreon supporters. You are supporting the long-term sustainability of the podcast, keeping this content free and accessible to all people. So thank you. If you want to join the Patreon community, get exclusive access into my research and personal exploration, then you can head on over to patreon.com/modernanarchypodcast. also linked in the show notes below. And with that, dear listener, please know that I am sending you all my love, and let's tune in to today's episode. So the first question I like to ask each guest is, how would you introduce yourself to the listeners?
I am a lifelong ravenous learner and life scientist, and have found that many of the paradigms we were born into, don't fit with our human nature, and they also don't support a life of relative enough happiness enough. I call it not like pure bliss, but happy enoughness. And ending a number of paradigms or transitioning out of them. I've also found myself up against the wall with many limitations and regrets.
Sure.
And I'll never stop wanting to learn. But basically, what I do now is I am an introspection and parts work relationship coach, where I focus on attachment and healing parts of us so that we can reclaim a sense of power and live happier lives no matter what's going on around us. So there's a few themes, but I basically would distill my purpose down to I just want people to feel better.
Yeah.
Better than they do.
Right. Absolutely. Yeah. I'm already thinking about the cultural paradigms of what's possible, right? And how that can impact what we dream of and what we accept, even, right? If we take it even into the like more extreme cases of abuse and that being normalized, if that's where you've grown up and that's just what you expect, and then the full spectrum all the way to the other side of pleasure, and where do we cap that off, being so linked within our cultural context of what's even possible, right? So I'm excited to hear about how sex and relationships is related to this for you.
Well, sex and relationships. So sex and relationships are sort of the foundation of our species and survival and society. And society doesn't want to admit that. Society loves admitting that relationships, one core relationship, should form the basis of our entire life. But once that relationship is in place, which was often founded through the act of sex, it's often that distinguishing characteristic that makes that relationship more important than any other relationship in our lives, except, our children that we end up having with that person. Once that happens, we forget about our sexuality, or society wants us to forget that we all have deviant sides, that we have 6 core human needs per the Tony Robbins framework, one of those being variety and novelty, and that this should just remove or dissipate from the realm of sexuality once we're in relationships. And in the forgetting and dusting that under the rug, we are inhibiting the single most important thing in the human species that is more important. They've scientifically proven, especially to babies, it's more important than food and water is connection, human connection.
Cat
Kitty
time.
agrees.
Yes. And animal connections.
And animal. Yeah, so human, you're right. So entity connection.
Sure. Yeah.
It's going to be different with the sea jelly, but mammalian,
Right.
whatever,
Right.
whatever you're into. So, would it make sense to actually explain a little bit of how this piece of my journey began in terms of sex and relationships? Because that might help contextualize kind of this abstractness I'm talking about.
Let's go for it.
Kitty says more. So I grew up in a traditional Eastern Orthodox monogamous environment, child of immigrants, very small family in this country, and an only child. And my only siblings were cousins that I adored, but I only saw them on holidays. So the smallness of my tribe, for lack of a better word, was always something that I wondered about. And because of the smallness of our tribe, our family fell into what I consider a number of pitfalls that tend to plague the nuclear family, which is one member of the family is incredibly dominant and oppressive and patriarchal, and the rest are tiptoeing around that person and learning patterns of submission and suppression and internalized rage. So that's what I came out with.
Mm.
And I had practiced monogamy for over 2 decades. There were certainly questions because I am a scientist at heart. There were always questions like, gosh, we live a long time. That seems like a long time to just have sex with one person or only be romantic with one person forever. But the thought of having them overlap in any way never crossed my mind.
Yeah.
And even in my marriage, I would say that we stretched into the realm of what's called monogamish, which your listeners might be familiar with. And I was actually, even though part of the reason we did that is there were issues with the relationship where ultimately we separated, that element of openness felt like the sweet spot for me. So ultimately, when we separated, I was and I had a young son, I was faced with this question of like, how did the Disney dream die? And where do I go now? Like, what does this mean about me? What does this mean about like my prospects? Will I die alone? Like, I'm sure a lot of listeners and, a lot of people grapple with that at the end of something big. And the next sequence of events, I can only explain as divinely ordained, and I'm not a terribly religious person, but 3 weeks after our separation, after years of trying to figure out what we were doing, I ended up sort of accidentally doing ayahuasca.
Interesting. Yeah.
And not having any of the guidance or integration or like none of it, just got pulled in, had like my consciousness,
I'm sure,
blown apart. Yeah. Was not ready. But I came back with this sense of questioning everything. Like I felt like the hologram nature of this house I'm in and these problems I'm facing.
Yeah.
What is going on? Like the real Neo moment.
Yes.
And in that moment, that's when someone reached out to me on online dating, which I just was like barely dabbling in. And he was the first person I responded to because he actually had a beautifully written profile and attractive photos. And I was like, okay, if I'm going to go for something, let's just give this a try. And then right away, we messaged, definitely had a chemistry. And he disclosed right away that he was polyamorous. And not a little polyamorous, not a little non-monogamous, like lives with his girlfriend and his ex-wife and wasn't in a relationship with his ex-wife anymore, but was accustomed to having 2 equal primary partners at the same time. Now, at this time, my brain did not know how to compute what that actually meant.
Sure. Psychedelic number 2.
Psychedelic number 2. It was like, hey, why not? And I just went through this process in that moment where the word polyamory conjured a lot of uncomfortable images for me. I'm a feminist, and all I could picture was like a Charles Manson compound with naked women, pregnant, braiding each other's hair in trees, and like one dude clomping around like the sheriff around these parts and stuff. And I had a deep aversion to that, and that would end up following me into this. I also was like, okay, Leah, you are like the most jealous and possessive person we know. I'm a Scorpio, only child. You suck at sharing. I don't know. But then there was this moment that I think was the medicine that punched through that was like, yeah, but remember all the men you met throughout different relationships, and you just felt this warmth and vibration, and you were always like, why can't I like be a little
Yeah.
closer?
Yeah.
It always felt like forbidden fruit. And I never did anything. I've never cheated once in my life. I did help someone cheat. So that's the closest I got. And I felt awful about it. So these three things were speaking to me, but the chemistry we were having and the sort of question of like, I don't want to go back to the way I did things before. I don't want to get trapped again,
Yeah.
propelled me forward. And we crashed into love, moved in together very quickly, far too quickly for being sensible.
Mhm.
Um, Started raising our three different children together. And it was like total bliss. We were experimenting with more monogamish stuff. And I was like blissfully happy, but I knew what was coming. I knew
Mm.
his intention was to find another equal primary partner
Yeah.
because his mission was to break the model of the nuclear family and just build a bigger family.
Mm-hmm.
So lots of benefits, but I was terrified because now my attachment had set in and my son was also attached. I was
Sure.
attached to this family, this new home. And I was like, I'm just gonna stick it out. I'm just gonna see. And there she was one day. He met her and they very, very quickly went into a primary relationship. And everything changed.
Of course. It's like another child. It's a whole nother human relationship.
Relationship, but
Yep.
it changed our relationship.
Yeah.
It changed the nature of our family. It changed
Totally.
the rhythm we were in.
Of course.
Nothing was the same.
Right.
And would I describe it? I don't know if your listeners are familiar with the book Polly Wise, which is
Yeah.
Jessica Fern's second one.
She's been on the show before. We've
Of
talked about
course.
it. Yeah.
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 The thing that really stuck out for me from that book was how much we can't underestimate changing such a powerful paradigm. And this is why I study paradigms a lot
Yeah.
in
Cool.
my work. And what I would describe it, I don't know if she called it this, but what I would describe it is paradigm shock. It's a trauma that inverted every belief and program and rule of engagement I had ever known. And just, it was all gone. And it was the
Yeah.
most disorienting and it was debilitating for me. And there are aspects where I don't think I'm wired. I don't think I'm naturally wired. Like I wasn't one of those people that read more than two or ethical slut and was like, oh, I feel like I found myself.
Mm.
I was more like a curiosity, like, yeah, I see. These are fair points,
Yeah. Yeah. Yeah.
but
Totally. Totally.
I could entertain those points when I was in sort of a balanced, non-triggered state. But when my deepest traumas of abandonment and anxious attachment and rejection, mainly rejection, were triggered, there was no logical or rational place I could hold those good points.
Yeah. It's hard.
So yeah, so through the years, we ended up living with his other primary. She became my best friend.
Mm.
And I went into a really weird period of duality where I adored her. I loved aspects of the three of us together. I adored him. And I struggled so much with the importance of their relationship and how much it impacted ours.
Did you have any other partners at this time too? Just trying to get a lay out the land
I
because that
tried.
impacts a lot. So let me tell you.
I do. I
Yeah.
tried.
Okay.
And I would
That's
say
hard.
there are different variables that make that more successful. I actually have like a
Sure.
series of questions I ask my clients like,
Sure.
do you at the core believe in the freedom to love more than one person? That's not a clear-cut belief for me. That's conditional for me. Are you good at finding partners? Do you have a broad enough palette where you're not just trying to find someone better, as good or better than your partner, but you're rather looking for contrast and difference? That's not how I'm wired either. And what I would say is the person I am now would probably be better at finding other partners because I've recognized like I don't pedestalize my partner anymore.
Mm-hmm.
Like I'm aware of his immense strengths and uniqueness and specialness as a person, but I also know there's things I'm desiring to experience with other people.
Yeah.
A lot of it is opportunity. We lived in a very conservative area of Pennsylvania. There weren't
Yeah.
like attractive, conscious, growth oriented men like walking up off our lawn into our
Sure,
home. Like,
sure. Yeah.
and once your standards are raised to a certain point of a certain level of communication and
Yeah.
skills for attunement and skills
Yeah.
for intimacy, um, it, it's hard to kind of be like, okay, I'll lower my window, my threshold of tolerance and go that. So that's tough. But
Totally.
perhaps the biggest limitation, and I want to make sure it's known that this is very unique to me in case anyone's resonating a lot and feeling like, oh, if that's me, it'll never work. To be totally vulnerable, I have certain kinds of limitations in the realm of sexuality that are unusual, like medical issues that make polyamory where you have you're exposed to multiple people, varying degrees of risk, and a lack of control or insight into everyone therewith is profoundly risky for me. So that feels like a, oh, because I'm a very sexual person and I love intimacy and I deep down would love to have had multiple partners that I experienced different sides of my sexuality with, but there were just a lot of there was a deck stacked against us,
Mm-hmm.
unfortunately. And this is why today I really don't know what it is I'm moving forward or what I
Yeah.
will call towards. But what I do know is when I've been happiest was when there's a person with more than half predictability, reliability,
Sure.
availability to me
Totally.
to build a life that
Yeah.
feels consistent and stable for my children.
Yeah. That makes sense. Yeah. In terms of attachment and security and joy and just like even the depth of relationships that you can get. First, I
It
do
is
want to
a
say
function of time a little bit. A little
totally.
bit.
Yeah. Thank you for sharing all of your story and the vulnerability of it, of where you're at today and
Thanks.
all of it. Um, yeah, I mean, time and energy is so limited, right? I think as a relationship anarchist, like first stepping into that world of non-hierarchical and trying to do it
Hmm.
in that lens, it's like, what's the math on this? Like, do we give 20% here, 20, 20, 20, 20, like, you know,
Right, right.
and when you think about that, then I'm like, well, shit, then I can't get this depth of world building and life
Right.
sharing that I crave so deeply out of various connections. And so that can be so hard. And, you know, for me, I try to see it as the friendship model becomes really important in this
Yes.
where it's like, okay, so again, and this is where it's like, God, we got to talk about the sex thing in our society. It's crazy, crazy. But like, so let's take sex out of the equation for a moment
Hmm.
here, and we think about our friendships, right?
Right.
Do I believe in a world of loving multiple people? Yes. Look at all these friendships, all these beautiful people that I
Yes,
have in my
absolutely.
world. Yes. Look
Hmm.
at the ways that I'm able to trust in these connections that we're going to show up for each other without controlling and saying, you can't do this with this other person. You can't, doesn't mean we don't have special things maybe we do together, amount of
Hmm.
times that we commit to one another, but it's not this control model of you can't do
Right.
this with other people. Fat cat.
He's saying, I control you.
Exactly. Yes, she does. um, and then, yeah, in those models, though, when we have friends, we still create a hierarchy. Again, this is where I
Mm.
really appreciated the conversation I had with Juan Carlos, who wrote the book Relationship Anarchy, of it's not about no hierarchy at all. It's about no hierarchy of authority, right? So
Oh,
I love
okay.
that paradigm, right? Just
Hmm.
thinking about that.
Hmm.
So like my one of my friends doesn't look at the other friend and say, "You can't hang out with her.
Right.
You're not going to be friends with her anymore."
Yeah.
However, of course I have close friends that I see at a
Yep.
deeper frequency that I don't
Right.
see the others. And so there is a hierarchy of the limitation of time and energy, which I think then becomes the political piece too, right? When you think about like the politics of all of this, is like time and energy is limited. When you have kids, when you have these other factors, you have
Yes.
to be very conscious of where you're investing your energy and the politics of that and the ripples of that. And so, like, for me, I do have these, like, I talk about it in orbits. Like, I have a partner that orbits me in the most close right now. We talk every day. I see them
Mm.
pretty frequently. And then one that's like once a week, one that's twice a week, one that's like every month, right? And I have all these different lovers. And it feels like it's been this liberation, though, because now when we add the
Hmm.
whole like sex thing, then it gets complicated. Everyone's like, "Whoa," you know. But it's wild to me to think about culturally, like factually. There are other cultures that have practiced non-monogamy,
Absolutely.
you know, and so like we know that factually. But have,
Hmm.
however, particularly in American culture, that is not what we've been taught. You know, if we think back even to 100 years ago, as a woman, I'd be trying to maintain my purity, hoping that a man would marry me so that I could fucking live my life. You know what I mean? Like,
Oh,
and then
I
women were
know.
murdered if you had
Right.
had sex with someone. Oh my God, you know? So, like, oh, so when you think about the ripples of that to get to where we're at now, where we have these choices, there's so much to deconstruct. And in some cultures, it literally is forbidden to hug someone of a
Yeah.
different gender, right? So I
Yep.
think like in our American context, we'd be like, that's really interesting. People would probably judge that actually, but
Oh,
that's
that's so
very
strict.
right. And then if you just take a moment to
Right.
be Neo, unfold the matrix,
Yeah.
take the psychedelic, you say,
Have dinner with a member of the opposite sex and, spend two
right.
hours with someone. Woo, woo, woo. That's
Totally. And in my work in the psychedelic space of therapy, there is a strong, I mean, we haven't actually done research with this, but there's a strong correlation you would see between the types of clients that come in for that work, even if they haven't done a psychedelic, still coming to our space and like wanting to explore non-monogamy, all these other
mm,
things. Because
hmm
I do think it is related. You take the drug and you're like, this doesn't add up. Interesting. You know, obviously living into the
right.
complexities of that are a climb in and of itself, but there's something
Yeah.
about it that starts to shake the system just enough to start asking these deeper questions.
I love what you're sharing. And I want to loop in one of my favorite topics into exactly what you're talking about with psychedelics, because the most poly I've ever felt, even though I didn't have partners,
Yeah.
was during certain medicine journeys.
Cool.
And I'd be like, why is that? Why am I poly when I'm high?
Yeah.
So I'd love to talk a little bit about the work I'm doing with internal family systems
Sure.
and
Yeah,
parts
let's go
work.
there. Yeah.
Yeah, so I'm an IFS coach, and I am working to blend and integrate kind of four key frameworks that we love. People are grokking out on right now, and we can't get enough. And I've only engaged with these frameworks as mainly separate. So the four frameworks are polyvagal theory,
Mm-hmm.
IFS or parts work,
Mm-hmm.
attachment theory,
Yeah.
and the drama triangle, which is my current favorite thing to be like going so deep in right now.
Mm.
So all of these felt like separate. And then there's other things, love languages, the emotional
Sure.
spectrum, and boundaries, and one night, I'm a very visual person, and I was learning polyvagal theory through a program I want to give a big credit to, because their visual representation of our nervous system is the basis for this thing I'm working on, and they're called NeuroFit. And they put our different nervous system state on a circle in a way that, like, we have different temperature zones, like a thermostat, and our thermostat is always adjusting all day, heating up if we're getting upset, cooling off if we're trying to calm down, and like things like that. So that's the kind of the backbone of that. But what I'm using internal family systems for is helping understand why do we feel ourselves shift? Like, why do we engage with these paradigms differently when we're in different states of consciousness? And what I've come to realize is what I experienced in Aya, what a lot of people experience, especially heart opening medicines like MDMA or San Pedro, sassafras, things like that, is it's sedating or quieting one coalition of parts of us and reconnecting us from a core energy that, if anyone's familiar with IFS, there is this core energy that we describe that's called self energy. And in IFS, self energy has 8 C's, so 8 core characteristics. And those characteristics become a sort of compass for us to understand when our unwounded, unprogrammed, pure core essence is at the wheel instead of parts that are protective or wounded. So these characteristics are feeling calm, clear, curious, compassionate, connected, creative, courageous, and confident. Who doesn't want that? Right?
Right.
But a lot of us don't feel those things a lot of the day.
Sure.
So when we engage with paradigms like non-monogamy after being in a paradigm of monogamy, we tend to get disconnected from that energy because there's other parts that are really strongly attached to the paradigm, or they have been wounded in a way that this new paradigm triggers. So what I've realized in retrospect is when in medicine, it gives you a direct access to that self energy. But what happens is that because people don't have a parts model happening, they think, oh, I'm changed now. Now I'm that. Now I am the person that was in that. And in that medicine state, we write checks, our self energy writes checks, our rest of our parts aren't going to cash. Like, no, you're not moving to Bali in a poly commune and quitting your job. And no, don't you remember that we're going to die and we're going to starve and we're going to be broke and we're going to lose our partner. And like, so when we come out of medicine, all of those protective wounded parts awaken back because we haven't really addressed their concerns, which is what parts work does. So it's a little bit tricky. That's why I think they have that 2-week guideline of not making any major life decisions after a journey, because your self energy is still kind of running the show and it has not taken a proper leadership position with the rest of you. That's like, yeah, no, we're not down with that.
Sure. Yeah. Yeah. I'd love to like work with you on this philosophy and like kind of explore it together. I've definitely done a lot of training from IFS as well, but I have a lot of critiques of it as well, I think.
Oh, cool.
Because I guess it's like I've also seen in my psychedelic work people who have explored psychedelics and not had that experience of the expanded state of
Sure.
love. I think about that being part of when we take psychedelics, there is that increased neuroplasticity, right? So we're making novel connections that maybe we haven't made before, and that default mode network is a little bit turned down.
Right.
But I've also seen people who are trying to explore even the concept of queerness, right? Who then actually feel deeper into their homophobia and judgment. And I think this is an interesting question for IFS in terms of like parts, right? Okay, so I have this internalized homophobia part. And like to claim that as your own part feels a little complicated, right? Because that's a societal influence.
Right.
I think we can still do it in an IFS framework and say like, this is a part that I have internalized. And when we take it back to a concept of like compassion and care, right?
Right.
Why is this part here? Oh, it's because it's been unsafe. And so this is why this part is here. So it's just like complicated though. Like, do I want to claim I have internalized racism parts? Like all these other messy parts of the system that aren't the like calm, collected, all of that. But so I think that like the psychedelic experience does not always produce us into the state of the more expanded love because of
agreed.
Yeah, the set and setting. Like I've had my own experiences with non-monogamy and stimulant psychedelics that have made it even more difficult, I would say, because watching my partner, it was so wild. It was literally The sex part, a joy. Watching him hold her hand, I
Oh, I
lost
know.
my
Oh, yep.
shit. I lost my
Yep.
shit. And
Yep,
that's what
girl.
I find to be so funny because like that's an act that in theory like he could do with his mom and like hold his mom's hand. But God forbid he holds another one,
Yeah.
like
Yep.
and to experience that on a stimulant which I was hoping would help me be more open and loving and in that space, it was
Yeah.
intense. I'm like
Yeah.
feeling it in my body now as I was there. I mean, we've done a lot
Oh,
of work, like you recall memories, you feel it in the body, right?
of course. Yeah.
Um, so I've done a lot of work now to not be in that space of like trying to do it in my ordinary states of consciousness and not use psychedelics to
Mm.
do that because I was really hoping that it would help. And
Hmm.
it just made it more intense to process. There have definitely been states of some psychedelic experiences where it has helped, but it feels so set and setting dependent that
Yes,
I can't
absolutely.
trust these medicines to like fully take us there. And if it was, we'd be having so many more people that are doing this. But I think it's
Yeah.
so I think about the work of Foucault. I think about the societal context and how deeply that influences what we even dream as being possible. I was not even thinking about non-monogamy before I knew the word on my psychedelics, right? Like
Oh, interesting.
never. No, I grew up very conservative Christian. I
Oh,
In terms of my jealousy journey, it was fucking a mess, man. Like I was told in Christian culture that I couldn't go and sit down with another male. It was all very
right.
like straight.
Yep.
I couldn't go and sit with another male and be alone with another male because that would be too tempting. So the
Ooh.
second that my partner said, "Oh, my boyfriend at the time, oh, I'm gonna go get coffee with someone," I lost my shit. I lost my
Mm,
shit. There's no
yeah.
way you're doing that. No way. So, so just to be where I'm at now, where I'm like, yeah, go have sex, have fun, like go on the date, take the camping trip, go have fun. Like, it's been quite the journey, and we have to look at the societal context that have shaped that.
Mhm. Well, you're giving me hope because I'm definitely not in the yeah, go have fun camp at all. Not there
Man,
at all.
it's hard. I think that's where the concepts of relationship anarchy have been really helpful. Like,
Mm,
why do I so my partner, let's think, okay, they're gonna go have a board game night with their friends, or they're gonna go have an orgy. Why do I get more upset about one versus the other?
right.
I think for me, it feels like classical conditioning. The amount of years that I've seen content, the Disney, all the
Yeah.
rom-coms, it says they're gonna leave you, that's bad. And so it's
Right.
taken years of training with my partners to have them go to the orgy and us
Mm,
still be in connection and me be like,
wow.
okay,
Amazing.
we're still fine. Like,
Right.
holy shit. But was I scared? Was I crying? Did I need to be held afterwards? Yeah.
Mm,
But it's because I've
yeah.
never had this like sort of experience where they actually stay.
Right. It was never contextualized as safe. And I'll
Yeah.
tell you, like, I'm a huge movie buff and I'm still, I think there's also an aspect of retraining a nervous system with rewards. So I had a lot of lovely open group experiences, but mainly with my partner there. I could count on three fingers how many experiences I had by myself.
Yeah.
If that had been not the case, if I'd had a greater capacity and ability to, and availability of people to do that, I probably would have been able to not only take the fact that he came back, because he did,
Yeah.
but also retrain that it's not just a story of me waiting around for my partner to choose
No.
me. And that's kind of
Yeah.
that's the model we fell into.
Oof.
The zero sum game that we were looking to escape came into our relationship and like doubled down. So now in how I organize my life, we're still in connection, but we don't share like who we're with. We're like really giving total separation around our romantic lives. And that's giving me more like breathing room to
Mm.
not be processing his stuff, but to focus that energy on my own explorations
Yeah.
and such. And I want to honor you. Like that's a really tough jump that I've not been able to make yet. But I think it's very possible that if I did meet another partner, which I'm
Yeah.
always waiting and open, everything could change.
That changed so much for me because I was
Yep.
in grad school for a handful of years and could did not have time. I can't even imagine having children, right? Because let
Yeah.
alone like I live by myself. Like I have this studio apartment. I live by myself. I've never shared
with the
my
kitty.
space. Well, yeah, that's true. I do live with the kitty, but like to live with a partner and another partner, I don't even know if
Oh,
I ever want that. Like, I don't, I like my
it's
home
a
base.
lot of energy.
Yeah, that's what I'm saying. So like there's so I think that's what a lot of people get lost onto of this of like, oh, I want to practice non-monogamy. I'm like, well, welcome to a very big drawing board of multiple ways to do this, my friend, because
Yes.
couple to throuple is one of the most hard, like the
Yes.
hardest way, I think. Where like when I live alone and then I have all these different relationships around
Right.
me where I'm centered in my experience and I'm not waiting for that part, this is a whole
Game
different,
changer.
yes.
Yeah. So that's why I always recommend like people don't move in yet.
No.
Don't move in together yet. If you are not sure you are on the same page about how you want to live, if you're moving in with a poly person, there's a high chance they're going to want to consolidate at some point. And there's many benefits to doing so. I do want to name we had a number of different like friends and loves come
Sure.
through and we benefited our children. My favorite gift from that is really how our children
Oh,
saw, like, met different people.
yeah,
And like, I remember my son hugging me and my meta, and he was just, I guess I don't bring any of the wounded inner child victim consciousness that I have around my parentified relationships.
sure.
I don't bring that around him. So I felt compersion for him. Like I was like, oh,
Mm,
that's what that feels like. Because it was
yeah.
like completely inaccessible for me. But that was the window where I understood. And I may not be that person that can release that and feel that way about an adult bonded male partner, save for if I moved to an intentional village or community and like the have you read the book Untrue
Mm-mm, no.
by, oh, you should definitely seek
Okay.
Dr. Wednesday Martin for your show. Oh yeah.
Sure. I'll check it out.
Her book was incredible. It's all about the non-monogamous nature of women,
Mm,
which has not really been
oof.
focused on.
Oof. Oof.
Sorry
Okay.
guys. Sorry.
Wow.
Sorry, the 70s.
Man.
Um, and she focuses a lot of research, anthropological research on the Himba tribe in Africa. And that blew my mind. And it didn't
Sure.
make me a poly person, like, oh yeah, I'm poly. And I do call myself bisexual. But what was most important was that way of life where the women are non-monogamous. They're not like openly KTP poly. Like they're not always going like, you are my meta now, and now we are sisters. Like it's under radar a bit, but it's like not a thing. It's just a thread in their tapestry, and they don't make a big deal out of it,
Right.
which I think is interesting. But they have these certain variables at the core of their society, which is their sisterhood. They grow up with the same people that they know, like, and trust.
Mm-hmm.
They rely on each other for survival, and there's not just two of them, with a third coming in and upsetting the entire apple cart, and like with a small shaky foundation. And I think that that matters. Like I can't let go of the question is if I lived in an environment like that and there were plenty of available people, I may not feel the absence of this one person I'm attached to,
Right.
so to move into this poly paradigm, it is fucking painful to break apart this original paradigm, and we're not like resourced enough for
Yeah.
it.
That's what I've talked about the metaphors of water. Like we started
Mm,
this conversation out with, connection is absolutely necessary for survival from
mhm.
birth all the way to the end. We even see people who are like connected, in monogamous couples when they age as one dies,
Yes,
often the other fall. There's like
right. And within
connection
a
is,
year.
yeah. So
Hmm.
connection is what keeps us alive. It is a resource. You need food, water, connection, right? And if we
Yeah.
think about
Yeah.
like water and connection, if you do not have these deep connections and you have one and you're asking, can I share this one with someone else? Fuck no. Fuck no. That's my
Right.
one source of water, Which is
Right.
what really changed it for me was to have multiple sources of flowing water. I was like,
Right.
Oh, this is interesting. And how, right. And I think that's where you have to talk about the structural implications for this, right? Because we're
Yes.
not living on the commune. Some of us are. And that's a very different structure because when you, I don't even know if how a commune life works, but the family dinner, everyone's there. You know, we're in our nuclear setups here in these living situations
Right.
where we are often lacking a community space where everyone comes together.
Right. Right.
Then yeah,
Hmm.
what is the math on all of this to get enough of these needs met? Oof, messy, right? So I
Right.
think it's like this question of like our struggles with it are so based on like, yeah, cultural context, like that example you're talking about of the other culture where they practice it. It's like us, we hug in my culture, I hug multiple people. I don't
Yep.
even think about it.
Yep. Yeah. Not giving that up.
Right. And in some cultures you don't. And so like
Right.
let's spectrum out here and we're like, okay, okay. And so in that though, it's still the question of all of the deep classical conditioning. And
Hmm.
and I think that an important piece too is that like, you know, like my body is able to birth a child. Okay. I'm able to do this. I have this capacity, but maybe I don't want to. Even if we
Yeah.
are able to do
Right.
non-monogamy, maybe you just don't want to. And
Want
that's
to.
also
Yeah.
okay, right?
Yeah. Yeah.
Because maybe you don't want to. I think that's a part of the equation too, is like, I
Yes.
hope we get to a world where people understand there are multiple ways to do this. And right now, until we are
Absolutely.
at a space where like non-monogamy doesn't bring up so much of this deep pain point that I think is cultural and
Mm.
societally inflicted, it's not a
Hmm.
fair choice, right? Because right now we're like uncovering so much stuff with it that it's not even a fair option of, do I want to have kids or not? You know, in the
Yeah.
same way with like the women's liberation too, and,
Right.
and all able bodies who can have birth, right, is for so long, and it still is here, that like if you don't have a child, you're not meaningful.
Right.
Like, right?
What
And
does it
so
mean about you?
totally. And so until we deconstructed that, we have the liberation to now choose, do I want this or not? And I feel like this is another piece where it's like, not everyone's going to want non-monogamy, but we're not even in a space where we're able to actively choose it if we
Right.
wanted to without all of this
To implement it.
baggage. Yeah, it's fucking wild.
Yeah, I want to speak to that. And this is again why I think a large portion of people rapidly moving into CNM of some kind is
Mhm.
experiencing paradigm shock. Is the nuclear families that most of us were raised in, I think, actually inverted the exact conditions that we would need to make like communal, flexible relating
Yeah.
happen. So we were in these tiny microcosms with very few people, and they had no boundaries with us. We had no private space, and they had did not have proper relating skills. And like they were the ones we should have gotten away from, but we couldn't get away. Like it inverted like the exact opposite of what we needed, and we got wounded and shut down, and it deepened this I consciousness, like this individualistic consciousness that this world has made possible by money. So making money allows us to cut our human directive to rely on each other for survival. That's like our biological directive. But money has allowed us, you and me, to live on our own
Right.
and be like, nope, not taking your shit.
Yeah.
But we might feel lonely at times because we're not like, I don't think it's actually natural for us to be so isolated. So we come to CNM or poly, especially, and we're like, oh my God, the benefits, benefits. But we're bringing to it I consciousness and victim consciousness, much as a product of classical conditioning, as you said. So we're bringing these two ways that we relate that are highly incompatible with learning how to exist, to coexist in harmony with other humans. So I wish, this is a bold statement, but for certain people, I wish I could erase the word poly or CNM temporarily, but keep their desire to now understand they have to heal, implement healing consciousness. So, a sense that I'm a product of my experiences. I am bringing wounds. I am reacting from those wounds. It's possible for me to heal and shift my behavior.
Yeah.
That's number one. Then number two, instituting community consciousness.
Yeah.
Can you live in the same house with someone and get along and attune to their needs? And it's not always about you. Like, that's a difficult shift. That was the toughest thing for me as an only child, is going into a house of 8 people and like dealing with noise and who
Yeah.
gets the kitchen, and like I felt a lot of my I-ness come up, like, oh, it's annoying. Instead of, and it's mainly because I didn't really rely on them for survival. If I had, like, that forces us to become a lot more collaborative
Mm-hmm.
when we truly need each other.
Yeah.
So we put those things in place and make that work a bit, and then we start instituting CNM, especially polyamory, then I think that can start to take hold
Sure.
at scale.
That's relationship anarchy, right? Like right
Yeah.
there, right? It's
There.
like, how do we challenge the
Right.
systems and get back into more community? And then
Right.
in that challenging of the system, some people challenge the system of the sex stuff, right? So it's like
Mhm.
that, what you were speaking to just so deeply like hits what I think of as relationship anarchy, is getting back into community
I
and
see.
working together. Because you can
Yeah.
be monogamous and a relationship anarchist. And
Right.
so being about community and mutual aid and working together in that, and that being how we flip these systems. I mean, yeah. But I will say I love living alone and I don't get lonely
Oh.
actually, because I have enough people.
Right,
Like
right.
I
That's
haven't
true.
like I literally am like oversaturated. I would say like I am like either like last night I was at one of my partners or the other partner comes over and like so I
Mhm.
barely do have any alone
So you
time in
don't
my
even
own
feel
space.
it. Yeah, yeah,
No,
yeah. That's
no,
great.
which is wild, right? Like to think about, and that felt like, and again, individualistic Western culture for me to say I want my own living space. But man,
Mhm.
I don't know. I read the work of Virginia Woolf from years ago saying a room of one's own, and I said, what about an apartment? What
Yeah.
about that next level of like what it would look like? But again, I've also chosen to not have kids. I've had an abortion.
Right.
I did not go
Right.
down that path and had the
Mhm.
privilege to not have children. And so then I am living alone in a very different circumstance than you,
Right.
and what
Right.
that means in terms of my ability to have multiple partners and have them come over and it be so flexible. I mean, I
Yeah.
think that it's just like there's no right way to do relationships. Every single person is going to go down their own journey of their own individual context, their own relationships, let alone the cultural narrative of meaning making. I think about my
Mhm.
sister who is Mormon, and in their culture,
Mm.
when you get married, it is for all of eternity to one person. I
And
know.
beyond.
And beyond, exactly. And you are not allowed to have any solo sex.
Right.
You're not allowed to have it with anybody else. And that
Wow.
paradigm of meaning making, of what sex means for someone from that perspective to think about having sex with somebody else is not happening. That is a
Hmm.
act against God. That is an act against
Right.
all of eternity, So for me, this is we are just in like, like
Okay, we're
really
going to agree to disagree on there on those
yeah.
points.
And so like the need for all of us to slow down and really sit with our own like like I would just love for people to get more curious about like what was I told about sex? What was I told
Mm.
about exclusivity? What was
Yeah.
I told about love and romance and these
Hmm.
things? And is that something I believe in? Is that something I want?
Right. Right. How does that sit with me? And, one thing I want to clarify is I absolutely believe in our own functional spaces. And that's
Yeah.
also what we were missing when we grew up, because these houses, if you were lucky enough to have your own room, I didn't have a sense of privacy really in my
Yeah.
home. And my vision is like, I picture this compound that is like designed like the flower of life. And each node, it's its own tiny domicile
Mm,
where a person can meet all their needs,
mm-hmm.
but then they're close in proximity enough where they can come out and
Yeah.
visit other domiciles. And there's a centralized communal area for when you choose that, but you are also welcome to decompress and in source on your own.
Yeah.
So that was challenging even in the communal way that I lived is I shared a room, I shared a kitchen, and it hallways, like you could hear everything. And I mean everything. And that was confronting for me. But it was almost like it was just too much. So I'm looking for that Goldilocks zone, and
Yeah.
I have a dream of like owning a duplex where my partner
Yes.
or plus I don't know, we have our own spaces. We, knock on wood, have the privilege of doing that, but we have our own spaces, but then we are able to commune enough together where we don't feel isolated.
Yeah,
And
absolutely.
in a group of 20 people, that would be great.
Totally. Yeah. I hear that dream again and again from people in my community. I think people are dreaming more about what it means to have that sort of space. And sometimes I like to think about my apartment like that. Even though the Chicago is so large, I like to think, oh, this is just my little room
Yeah,
in the big commune of Chicago
your
where
little oasis.
yeah, I meet some of my friends at our beach or the gym, and like we come together out of the rooms, but I don't know if I could really like live in that level of continual community. That's a whole different ballgame.
What?
I love the alone time. I love my very quiet solo bath with no one
Mhm.
else around. And
Yeah.
yeah, I feel like I want to like pinpoint back to some of the concepts of like jealousy and fear
Mm.
because I
Mhm.
think it was really radical for me to start connecting with other people and then to use that level of framework when I get scared. Because
Yes.
yeah, because I was
Useful.
like, yeah, when I only had one partner and he was exploring it with other people because I was in grad school and too busy to comprehend another romantic, sexual, however we would define that
Yeah,
relationship. It was not gonna happen.
sure.
So it was really hard for me to like process, and on all of the fears and all of that was coming up. Where I have multiple people, it is much easier in the moments when I think about, and I think the context of this is that, how I talked about orbits of closeness.
Mhm.
The closer in orbit you get to me, the scarier my jealousy is, right?
Oh,
So
because the deeper attachment and intimacy and vulnerability, right?
right, and potential of loss, right? Like the
Oh,
partner
yeah.
I
Yeah, yeah,
see
yeah.
once a month, it's not that I don't love them and I care for them,
Yeah,
but like, whoa, my orbit would be drastically shifted if my
right.
close one shifts. And could you imagine if the sun stopped showing? We'd be like, we'd be,
I can. It did feel like that,
ex-
if I'm
ex-
honest.
exactly. And that's
Yeah.
fair. And so it was interesting for me to kind of like watch my jealousy across orbits and say,
Mhm.
interesting. Okay, so this one doesn't freak me out. This one
Right.
kind of freaks me. This one really freaks me out. So then it was that process of, okay, what about that? I'm afraid that I'm not going to
Yeah.
have time for me. I'm afraid that I'm not going to have enough space to connect with them. They're not going to show up in the same way. They're going to leave me. And then
Hmm.
that kind of allowed me to like simmer in that and then try to think about my own orbiting system of say, okay, no, like I have all these beautiful relationships. I'm not just abandoning these people. And one of my favorite parts is when I've had sex with other people and loved the sex that I had. And then it also made me miss the other partner even more. It was
Mm.
like having a delicious bowl of ice cream and then saying, God, I love the brownie though. Like I love the brownie.
Of
And sometimes I love them together. But like when you taste these different flavors to be able to have that joy and
course.
appreciation.
Yeah. Hmm. Yeah. And
Wow.
I can relate to that a tiny bit. And part of the sadness I experience when I think about like, how things ended up for us,
Hmm.
there is something to say about the rewiring of pathways
Yeah.
where I've never really gotten past 1 to 2 intimate experiences with another connection. And I've seen a lot of people. My partner, on the other hand, has had multiple other primaries and, he's liberated himself in that way. But I noticed that even when I was experiencing intimacy, I was experiencing all of those pleasure chemicals of novelty and
Yeah.
the contrast and the newness. But the force of sexual fidelity program in me is very strong.
Sure.
So I could not shake the feeling of cheating, that
Yes.
I was cheating.
Yes. Yes.
It's incredible and it's still there. Like,
Yeah.
so, when I asked my partner, was that weird for you at all? Like, is it weird for you ever at all? And he's like, honestly, it's not weird now. And I was like, oh, but it's like, it was in the beginning. It took a number of times.
Yep.
settle and be like, oh, actually, nothing is wrong. And like he unpacked his what cheating meant. And I feel like I've not broken that veil,
It's so hard.
if that makes sense.
It
So if I had
does.
a person I had sex with 3 times, maybe that would be like the, oh, I see. This is actually okay.
It's
So,
hard. I'm
yeah.
resonating with that. Yeah.
Really?
Yes. Yes, of course. Because there's something to like, for me, there was something to like playing with people and then something
Mm,
to building deep
mm,
love
mm.
and then to be having sex with two people that I deeply love. And I felt like, yeah, I was cheating on the other. Like, even though I had full, it, like,
Interesting.
my brain was like, no, there can only be one. There can only be like,
Oh, tell me the secret then. What happened?
dude, you know what actually happened? I think the answer is I cried a lot. Right? Like that's the real answer
Ah.
is I cried a lot.
Hmm.
I think about the set and setting of the psychedelic.
Hmm.
You know, that set and setting is going to change the experience radically. So,
Hmm.
with the partner who had done 10 years of non-monogamy, I never felt like I was cheating with him. Oh, that's a fascinating one because
Mm.
he was so grounded, so supportive. We were so kitchen table, so open, so everything that it truly felt like another friend I had connected with, and how beautiful. Now,
Hmm.
the person that was newer, more sensitive, more unpacking a lot of this, I felt like I was hurting him. And that was a really
Uh-huh.
interesting thing for me to realize because
Okay.
this second partner wasn't the only person I had connected with in the last couple of years of dating and partnership. I had connected with others who were equally like in depth to polyamory building, never felt like I was cheating on them.
Hmm.
So that I found very interesting was like, okay, whose consciousness am I holding in my head? Is it my
Right.
one partner who's like, yes, go, run, do this. I'm so supportive. Tell me about it after if you feel comfortable and there's consent on all parties. Like, yes. Or the partner who's like, I support you. This is hard, but I support you. And when I hold that consciousness in my head, I do feel like I'm cheating. And then also like the narratives in my head of like the romance myth and
Right.
where they fall into it, then it does feel like I'm cheating that narrative. And that's,
Mm.
you know what I mean?
Interesting.
Because
The narrative.
the one, the newer one that was newer to Polly and all of this, like he meets all of my like dream boxes of the type of like, if there's a romance myth, it's him.
Okay.
So
That's what I call the game changer relationship, where
it
you're like,
was.
oh shit, there's some old things that want to come
Yeah,
up and contain some of this.
totally. He's a lot like my dad. Ooh, that's a damn it, Freud.
Oh,
Damn it, Freud
no,
had
boy.
some insight there. Shit. So yeah, that was it was a game changer to bring that into the orbit, let me tell you. But that narrative, then I felt like I was doing something wrong out of the narrative of the meaning making of what I was constructing with that person, plus his tenderness around that. So these are all the things I'm like considering, weighing. And then I do think about the fact that I came from purity culture. I had a purity ring. I was deep in it. So the first time, yes.
Never even heard of that.
Oh, are you
Wow.
I still wear it out of empowerment these days. I have a long story
Like
about that.
reclaimed it. Hmm.
Yes.
Hmm. Nice.
Yeah, after having my first like multi-group play experience, I had like what I would call an IFS parts work rebound where my body was like, "You're such a whore. Oh my God, how
Oh,
dare
okay.
you?" So I
Yeah.
jokingly
Hmm.
said I'm going to put back my purity ring on to reclaim some like some pureness and now
Here I
I
go. Here I go. Okay.
yeah, totally. So it's on now every day, which I find funny.
Like during the experiences, you're like, here we go.
Here we go. I'm clean. I'm fucking crazy. But that gives me some level of paradigm thinking because then I think about when I first was in purity culture, the first time I had sex outside of that, I cried. I felt like I was doing something wrong. The
Okay.
first time I had sex with two different people in my lifetime, I felt like I was a whore. No one was ever going to want me because I had had
Wow.
sex with
Okay.
two different people. And I cried about that,
What a journey. Oh
let
my
alone two
gosh.
people at the same time,
Right.
let
Yep.
alone two people in the same room, hence
Yeah.
the rebound. So, like, I've just held some level of, like, I don't even know at this point, mindfulness and distrust of my own experience enough to step back and say, okay, I'm having a reaction and I'm gonna go through it. Like I'm
Hmm.
going to go through it like I've done with these other ones. And so it literally is like me with the partner who I didn't feel like I was cheating on, crying about the fact that I felt like I was cheating on the other one, and him holding me and saying, "It's okay, you're gonna get through it." And
You're
I
gonna get
can
through me. You're gonna get through me.
you're gonna get through it. It's gonna be fine. And him like literally holding me. I was like, I feel like I'm cheating on the other guy. Oh no. And he's like, it's okay. And I was like, okay. And then just like literally living into that over the last couple of years, months, right? And then just
Wow.
it doesn't feel like that now. Just like when I first had sex with someone outside of marriage, it doesn't, I don't even fathom that thought
Yep.
now. But like, I think this is how and again, I hear this out of so many of my clients who, and in my community, of how we can have value systems of who we want to be and the ways that this deep conditioning, it makes it hard. It makes it so
Mhm.
hard. And there's so much to unpack around that.
Well, I am finding similarities and differences, and this is where it's so fascinating how we're all just my favorite line that I want to tattoo on my face is we're just different people having a different experience of the
Mm,
same thing.
sure.
This is what helps me return to the minute I'm like, they should feel this way. They shouldn't feel that way. Like I'm like, shh, shh, shh. So what you said was interesting because I definitely have felt more cheaty if my partner was struggling, even though he
Right.
was full on poly and not
Right.
worrying about that for me. So I felt that way. But like, we reached a place where his feelings are not in the equation in terms of like what I'm free to do. But what you just said really helped crystallize something I've been trying to put words to
Mm,
is that I'm cheating on the narrative. It's like it feels like I'm cheating on Walt Disney. Like I'm
right.
cheating on those little moments where I was watching the princess movies, which were a big deal to me because I'm a singer and like I grew up
Sure.
learning those songs. And just like this idea of this knight coming to rescue you and building a castle for you,
Right.
and you are special.
Right.
And, having an only child, the special role, I don't know that I'll unwind that program. It's all I've ever known. So having a sibling that was equal, like it fried my motherboard. So I am always curious, like if it were a couple of times and everyone's cool, would I be able to release the idea that I'm not cheating on a narrative or the specialness model? So it's so fascinating to hear the different factors that have been at play and just how far across the spectrum you've traversed. It's amazing.
Thank you. I've
Thank
cried. I've
you.
cried a lot. I've cried a lot. I've had lots of deep somatic responses. I'm even
Sure.
thinking about your being a solo child though. Like
Mhm.
you've shared your parents.
Right. But each of them had one specific gender role. And I've noticed that my non-monogamy spans wider with women,
Sure.
but I don't desire as much romantic relationshipiness. Like
Sure.
I dream of like my favorite time of my life was living in a dorm of 20 people. And I had like these flirty, we would like mess with each other things with the girls,
Sure.
but I wanted like my big male relationship. So there were very distinct gender roles. Like I
Yeah.
had one mom, one dad. I have one child. He's biologically an only child.
Mm-hmm.
So there's a long lineage of that.
Sure.
So even though I shared them, their roles were like not remotely similar,
Yeah, yeah, yeah,
if that makes
totally.
sense.
But I'm thinking about the fact that, like, so your parents, though, had relationships to other people, other humans, other connections in a way that still made you a priority. And I'm curious
Oh,
what a
okay.
world of like non-monogamy could look like for you of being prioritized to the level of
Yeah.
your literal dreams. Whatever that is,
Yeah. Oh, yeah.
meeting that.
Yeah. I am clear. Like, for me, it's also about timing because I do know that NRE and the chemicals, I'm
Yeah,
familiar with the neurobiological cocktail of
intense.
chemicals. NRE, like poly during NRE, kind of like they don't make sense to me. And part of it is the extent, the intensity that I experience NRE, which is almost why I'm afraid to fall in love with someone new because I'm like, I don't
Mm,
want to lose my shit again.
totally.
And in
I feel
some
that.
ways, I think it was ordained, but also unfortunate that my first engagement truly with non-monogamy that was more than just dabbling with monogamish happened to be with a human that I've felt a deeper
Mm,
emotional, intellectual, sexual,
sure.
and spiritual connection with than anyone I've encountered since. And like I know now, having done enough parts work, that my very monogamous little girl, princessy parts, he became that knight. He came along
Yep.
when I was like completely starved for love. He brought me to the castle. He whisked me away to
Yeah.
the paradise, and we both brought a lot of enmeshment dynamics. You know, there was definitely stuff on both sides. So now, like, I don't know that I can involve his polyamorous life into mine because my mono parts have been so heartbroken
Yeah.
by that. But with someone else, maybe if I want to invite all of that in again,
Totally.
it would be a different experience for sure.
Totally. Yeah. Again, I think about psychedelics. You have a difficult experience your first time on mushrooms and you say, never
I
again.
know. Yeah.
You know? And it's like,
Yeah.
what was the set and setting? What were the
Right.
dynamics? I'd be curious about like if there's the part of the mono princess. I'd be curious what the part of the feminist pioneer.
Yeah. Oh, she's strong too,
Yeah, what does
believe
she what
me.
does she say?
She says, yeah, I should be able to do what I want. And keep in mind, there's a very strong queen bee part in me too. I've, at different points in my life, had little groups of men that I was the only woman, and I just loved it. I wasn't sleeping with, like, we were all friends, but energetically, I love the plurality. I think it goes back to that friendship, like you were talking about. Like,
Hmm.
I'm living in a time in my life and situation where I have very few, practically no close friends. My partner is
Mm,
one of the only people I see physically in person.
wow.
I live in the suburb. I don't know anyone in my neighborhood. Everyone's doing their own thing. My friends are scattered all across the world, all focused on their own lives.
Wow.
This was a weird
Yes.
time to encounter this model where if I were in college and I had 20 close friends and I had energy with lots of people at the same time, or at work, I always had several work husbands, and you know what I mean.
Mm-hmm.
So now it's just a very strange time where there's like I have to build like even a baseline. And when I have friends, I had neighbors in my last apartment complex that I randomly met, and they happened to be poly, and they I was the only other person they met like that in their entire
Wow.
life, which was wild. And we bonded together.
Of
And
course.
then I felt like I had an extended family, and I wasn't feeling the sadness around what my partner was doing. So those friendships, I think, are like the starting point.
Yep.
Add sex at your own peril, but this is like, I want to find a way where we find a co working space where it's not working. We
Yeah.
just, single people can go at night
Yeah.
and just hang out.
Yeah.
And
These
it's
are
not a bar.
needs. These are needs.
These are needs. Agreed.
Whether
Agreed.
you're monogamous or non-monogamous, we need community spaces and
Yes.
connection. It is heartbreaking to think about the silos of these small little pockets and what that can do. That is
Mm,
not
it
natural.
hurts.
Yeah, it's like isolation. It's you can sell a lot of stuff to a nuclear family because you need your
Right.
own this, that, and this to prove that you're doing it. But oh my God, our needs are not being met there. And yeah, for me, like even in my world, when I am connecting with people, it is friends, however we define that first, because I really don't want to just play with someone who can't oscillate back and forth between some sort of space where maybe we don't have sex for like 3 months, 3 years.
Hmm.
I don't know, you
The
know?
pressure.
Yeah. Yeah, I need someone who can be flexible to just watch TV one night, maybe have sex in 3 weeks, and like if so what that means is I not that you can't have sex on the first date, but I don't because
Oh
I
yeah, no.
want to establish like are we emotionally compatible to
Right.
navigate the complexities of what we're about to take on together? And if we are,
Right.
hell yeah, let's run and dance and be free. But otherwise, like, I'm not even interested in kissing you. Like, that doesn't even cross my mind
Yep.
personally. Like, no.
Yeah. Who are you if we're not getting drunk and, opening up I see it as sacred again because I've had to internalize sexuality differently. This sacred, delicate, vulnerable place, and I don't know anything about you, and I'm not against casual sex in any shape or form. Like people should do what they're going to do, but knowing what feels right, it's like I know how cords can get tied for me, and I know what I'm not willing to sign up for. You said something interesting
Mm.
about you can sell a lot of things to nuclear families. They
Yeah.
need one of everything. I'm so glad you said this because this is exactly what I meant by money allowing us to break our financial need for each other, like our survival need, but not our soul survival need. So I was watching my own TV by myself,
Mm-hmm.
and there was a commercial for some cable network so you can always get the game,
Mm.
like a football game.
Mm-hmm.
And they show a neighbor walking to his neighbor's house. I guess they know each other. And I was like, oh, that's nice.
Yeah, yeah.
um,
Need more of that.
well, I said we need more of that. That'd be so nice. He knocks, and his neighbor is all decked out in like the makeup, the colors, the
Sure.
paraphernalia for his team because the game is on. And the one who came over is like, "Hey, do you have the game? I can't get it on my TV." And he's like, "Oh yeah, I have it on Dish or whatever was the network." He's like, "Yeah, come on in." He's like, "But there's only one requirement." And then the neighbor is now covered in the makeup and the
Yeah.
stuff. And they're sitting together and they're shouting together and they're high-fiving. And the punchline of this commercial is the neighbor who came over saying, I gotta get this channel. And my heart broke.
Yeah.
I was like, this was supposed to be a win for community.
Right.
And this is what consumerist capitalism has done. It has empowered us and our entitlement to having one of everything of our own. And now we're not having that experience where they had a blast together. They got so many good flushes of chemicals, of that oxytocin and bonding and serotonin and excitement, and their nervous system was in that play mode.
Yeah.
And the whole point of it was like that wouldn't happen again if the commercial was successful.
Right. Yeah. You'd probably love the relationship anarchy book. It ties a
I'll pick it up.
Oh yeah, it ties a lot of this together. I mean, even if you just think about the concepts of property being like the beginning of the institution of marriage and the
Mhm.
ownership and control in that way, like then you
Right.
start to see that with our partners. And again, a
Yeah.
marriage ceremony, beautiful. I love ceremonies of love. We also have to talk about where it came from, right? And
Right.
like,
Right.
and yeah,
Hmm.
that possession of this is my property,
Right.
this is my person,
Hmm.
this is and then you see that stretched out then through, yeah, through all of capitalism supporting that. And I don't know, I mean, it's so complicated because I want to end rape culture. And
Hmm.
I do
Hmm.
think part of that is through the liberation of our pleasure.
Yeah.
And it really makes me extremely uncomfortable when I hear of, again, nothing wrong with monogamy, the complexities though of it when one person, there's mismatched libidos. One person
Oh,
wants
yeah.
it more than
Hmm.
the other, and the other person is saying, well,
Yeah.
I'm willing to give you this. Not a, I want to have sex with you. I want to, it's a, well, if you're my husband and I'm obligated and I want to make you feel loved, I guess I'll give my body. Like, that makes me nauseous. That makes
Yeah.
me sick to hear that people are feeling like they're compelled, obligated to give their body. I want people to say, I want to do this for my husband and make him feel loved. And so I'm going to do this, not that I feel obligated. These are
I have to.
very different paths, and one is really close to rape culture. And when I look at the
Absolutely.
history of marital rape being legal in all 50 states until 1998, it
Oh,
has not been
wow.
30 years that America is
Wow.
healing from the ripples of that bullshit. And so
Wow.
when I think about, yeah, someone in a long-term partnership feeling that, I say that is a part of that. And
Yeah.
then when you hold the complexities of, again, like you were saying, we're all different people having different experiences. What turns me on is not always going to align with my one monogamous
Right.
partner.
Mm-hmm.
Now, we can
Yep.
make choices. We have to make choices in our lives of, again, whether you want to have the kids or the non-monogamy or not. Again, and you're going to have different complications with that. So maybe that means not ever getting to engage in that fantasy, and that feels okay. But what makes me feel very uncomfortable is when I hear some of my monogamous friends say, "Oh, my partner doesn't want to do anal, but I'm gonna get him there." And I say, "What the fuck? Could you
Oh,
like this is somehow normalized because
yeah.
it's your
Yeah.
one person that you're going to
Right.
push them to
Right.
get to a state where you get what you want because this is the
Hmm.
only person you can do it with." I am really uncomfortable with that.
Yeah. It's a sense, it's that going back to our I consciousness and sense of entitlement, that the marriage was originally designed to give the man access to a source of sex and guarantee, obviously, like guarantee, his inheritance and parentage. But that was what it's designed. And look, that part in me, you asked before, like, how do we accept that there are certain parts of us in us? It's actually what I love about IFS so much is like that part is in me where I'd love to control the sexuality of someone that has blown me open so deeply, and it feels
Yeah.
absolutely soul crushing if he shares that experience with someone else and I don't know what that's like. But I can also deeply resonate with the sense of the entitlement between spouses. And I am a proponent of dismantling sexual starvation in long term monogamous relationships. I'm actually planning a post for Instagram that's like, if you actually want to have the chance of your partner being monogamous with you long term, you're going to have to understand a few things, that when you get married, it does not end your partner's sexuality. And if your libido declines, that doesn't make their libido decline. You are not the same person. So, how do we find creative solutions to disentitle ourselves and just begin to differentiate our needs? And that is a painful process for
Yeah.
people in long term, you know?
Totally. And then I get real upset when I hear women say, "What's wrong with me that I don't want to have sex with him?" And I'm like,
Oh, I know.
sure, we can slow down to talk about the orgasm gap. We
Mm-hmm.
can slow down to talk about the division of labor that is disproportionately often placed on females.
Mm-hmm.
We can talk about all of that. And we can also talk about the want for diversity. The research that I see has shown that, like, when women's long term desire crashes
Yes.
in long term partnerships, it actually crashes much faster than men. So, again, we can like
Yep.
get curious about the different variables that cause that, like I named. I think non monogamy is a piece of this, though, because the research shows that when women go back out into dating, it spikes up.
Yeah.
What do we
Yep.
think that means? So I get real upset when women say, "What's wrong with me
Right.
that I don't want to have sex with my long-term, partner or husband?" And I
Mhm.
say, "Nothing
Right.
is
You're
wrong."
gonna love untrue because
I'm already feeling it.
that's where I actually learned that women's attraction to their husbands declines at 2 years instead of seven, which
Yes.
is like for the men, and that they actually cheat earlier at the same rate and earlier. And I was like,
Damn.
but I do think there's another piece too. I think there's an element of non-monogamy, but there's also I think, a stepping stone there to examine where I can resonate with, having been called asexual in a prior relationship when I just like couldn't get my desire online. And I'm like, I wasn't always like that though.
Right.
And the deeper question ended up being, was I into him
Mhm.
anymore? Did he turn me on? And like sometimes I wonder, like, for these women who are struggling this way, making it about themselves, if your husband turned into Henry Cavill, like was still his soul, his personality, but turned into Henry Cavill and studied Tantra and slowed down, got off the sex escalator, and gave you 4 orgasms and attuned to your feelings, do you think you would not want to have sex? Like,
Yeah,
no, you'd probably want to. So non-monogamy, I think it is a factor, but I also just see broken intimacy so
totally.
much.
Totally. Yeah. Yeah, because I did see one study that like it was interesting. It had relationship sexual satisfaction and it had swingers at the top.
Yeah.
It went swingers, poly, monogamous,
Oh, how interesting.
right? So
Yeah.
even the concept of like multiple people for a long term hits the
Right.
same complexities of what does building long-term eroticism mean when you
Hmm.
hit that 2-year mark, when you hit that 7-year mark, you hit the same things whether it's one people or two, you know? So
Exactly. Yep.
so right, what does it mean to maintain intimacy in those spaces?
Yeah. I wrote in my post, like, if this is what you want, you're going to have to consider certain things. Your partner's sexuality is not going to die if yours does. You may want to take certain things off the table as cheating, like looking at other attractive people,
God, that has to
whether
be a bare minimum, folks.
online or in person. Like,
Jesus.
find a little bit of security and acceptance. Like, okay, thank God there's a pulse. Okay, like that's what
Yeah.
I feel when they check someone out. I'm like, oh, thank God they're alive in there.
Yeah.
um Taking things off, like watching filmed intimacy that's nonviolent, that's more tantric. There's sources out there. Maybe that's not cheating. Having a friendship, allowing for more intimate friendships or people to actually emotionally support each other. Like, we can cordon off until the cows come home, but it's not ending anyone's sexuality. It's not actually deactivating it. It's just making the pressure build until someone cheats and now they have a character flaw that spans an entire species. And you're like, but how did that happen?
Yeah. Esther Perel and Dan Savage had quoted it in the 70% infidelity. And
Yes.
when I talked to Jessica Fern, she said 40. And I'm like, okay, even if we meet
Who
somewhere
really
in
knows?
the middle. Yeah, well, yeah, because no one wants to report that.
Right.
Like 50% of
Yeah. It's not
relationships?
5%. It's not 5%. So either
No.
this is a species wide flaw,
That's an interesting frame to look at it.
or
A need.
some way we're going about this isn't working.
Right.
And I'm by far not saying everyone be polyamorous, but I will say that when we accidentally fell into monogamish land, it felt more natural, it felt more freeing, and it felt more enlivening.
Yeah.
It just wasn't nothing. It wasn't nothing,
Yeah. And I
you
think,
know?
yeah, absolutely. And I, even just to pause and just think about the political power of the two of us women having this conversation, right?
Yeah.
Again, I think about, Margaret Sanger 100 years ago being thrown into jail for talking about contraception and
Wow.
the journey that that is for, queer sex has always existed. God, look back at the Greeks and what they were doing. Holy shit,
Slut
they were
people?
having orgies
Yep.
and massive, and of course, important piece of that is it was the aristocrats, the people with enough money to
Mm,
have that kind of pleasure and freedom and
mhm,
hedonistic time. So let's talk about systems, right? But
mhm.
100 years ago, you were arrested for talking about contraception. If I want to have sex with a penis, we have to talk about contraception. And so now we're in a space where I can talk about contraception. I can say I'm going to have sex for pleasure.
Yeah.
okay, and I'm
Right.
gonna have sex for pleasure with multiple people for me personally. That is my agenda of how I personally have moved through the boredom and lack of libido in long-term relationship is having diversity in the types of delicious desserts that I eat in my life, and that helps me cherish every single one. That is a radical narrative that women
Yeah.
have not been able to say in till today. And so
Yeah.
when you and I are going through these narratives of feeling like we're cheating, it's because I don't have a TV show of this. It's because I don't have a movie. It's
That's
because I
right.
don't have an example. And so for
Right.
us to sit here and even think about the complexities of all of this, one, it's literally giving language to parts of these experience. Like when you felt like you were cheating, I felt like I was cheating. That was like such a weird combo of strange feelings and emotions that I didn't even have words or language to when it was happening. And you're just like,
Hmm.
what?
Danger. Wrong.
Yeah,
Wrong.
yes,
Wrong.
but why? But why? You know?
Right. Right.
And so for us to even like get this out there for people to like hear that, be able to consciously move through that when that
Mm-hmm.
happens, for this is how the
Hmm.
beginnings of people having, again, not everybody being here, because that's
Right.
absurd. Everybody is going to follow down different cultural pathways, but to liberate the option of possibility, it's going to be uncomfortable for us, these people that are trying to pioneer this new way. And when other people are talking about it and leading examples of what it means to go down this climb, that's how we create space to do it for other people. That's how my future, lineage will be passed down through, like right now, my
Right.
niece. I don't have any kids, but like she, I hope up will grow to be a badass feminist that will look back at me and be like, Nicole, you weren't doing anything. Let me tell you what I do now.
You think
I mean,
that's crazy?
yeah, exactly. I'll be like, hell yeah, girl. You take the torch, lead the feminist revolution. I'm gonna go to bed now.
I love that. And you know, I think if we do want an internal emancipation, because I'm
Yes.
still working on internally emancipating
Yes.
myself. Again, back to Untrue, she talks about the very real inheritance of all of the calculations a woman makes when she's offered sex by a man, and it's very different than how what a man calculates. And if we had a starting point for inner emancipation, it would be like, how do we begin to take things that people are just doing, you telling them not to do it, and you telling them not to cheat, and you telling them not to check out other people, they're doing it. Can we just agree? So telling people not to cheat hasn't seemed to slow the rate of non-monogamy in relationships. I don't know that it has. Maybe for women it's discouraged it a bit, but it's pretty high, we're saying, right?
Mm-hmm.
It's still pretty high. So how do we take off the character assassination of our partner and ourselves for certain non-physical, even non-interactive engagements with people outside of the marriage? Like, okay, my husband just looked at another attractive woman. I can see that she's attractive. Originally, I would say he's a bad partner. And that's the character assassination. He's a bad partner. He's a bad person. And we take that out to start.
Mm-hmm.
Wow, my partner looks at someone else because they're attractive and they're not a bad person. They're just wired to do that. Okay. Um, my partner has a person at work who he's friends with and they see each other every day. Okay. He's not a bad partner. Do you
Yeah,
see what I mean? It's about
totally.
the divorce I want in relationship is divorcing character assassinations from the things that we do and
Yeah,
instead being like, oh, are we just wired this way?
right.
Oh, why did they do that?
Yeah. Again, it reminds me of purity culture, like the hops and skips I had to get out of. And again, that is literally where I was at. I told you with jealousy when he
Wow.
went to like go get any coffee, I was like, what? And like I was just almost like being overwhelmed, like to tears a little bit over here,
Mm,
thinking about my partners were like, I want to like stand here as to say that like I want my male partners to bring other females, if they're straight, to multiple rounds of orgasm because they're a loving, good person. They are a loving, good person. And when they connect with other people, I want them to be able to play and express that love and be able to give that sort of beautiful experience to somebody else. And I
Mhm.
know that that doesn't take away from the specialness of who I am and what we
Mm.
create because it's not comparable. There is no world. And so when I think about my male partners, I fucking hope that they are making other women come through multiple levels of cosmic joy because they're a good man.
Mm.
Yes.
That's beautiful.
Yes. That's why I was like, it was making me emotional just to think about that journey for me. It has been intense, but
Yeah.
like, that
Oh,
is
yeah.
love. That is love. Like, I want my partners to love other people.
Mhm.
Ugh.
That's amazing. And I honor that so beautifully. And I also honor that is beyond the line that I've been able to reach. And I also want people to feel like, like that is love for you. And it's so beautiful. And
Yeah.
I always think of love in parts where our self energy will express love in certain ways and our parts will express love in certain ways. And I don't share that, especially when it comes to like the one person I've been attached to in 8 years,
Mm-hmm.
but there are a million different factors why. But what I do know is that my self energy loves his self energy. At the end of the day, I want for his happiness. And I also just know that sometimes that can interact for people where like they can be like, if I don't feel that way, does that mean I don't love them?
Mm,
And I want people like, for my perspective, love is love, which is generally you just want someone to be in your life, meeting your needs a certain way and meet their needs a certain way. Like you want closeness, you want to create happiness with them in some way. And it's a very complex and tangled and nuanced thing. And
mm-hmm.
it is extraordinary that you've made that leap. I've met very few people that have traverse such a wide part of that spectrum. So
Yeah.
I love knowing that's possible.
Mm. Yeah, it reminds me of the bell hooks, who she had taken it from someone else too, like the concept of love being the support. I'm gonna butcher this, but the support. This is the live conversation. I don't get to
Yep.
research this on the spot. Um, the support of the spiritual development of another person.
Yeah, I love
Yeah,
that.
me too.
That's similar to what Alain de Botton, who created the School of Life channel on YouTube and writes
Sure.
her books.
Yeah.
He has some amazing talks on YouTube. There's one everyone should watch called Why You Will Marry the Wrong Person.
Yeah.
It's hilarious. I love his definition of relationship. He's like, definition of relationship is a container in which both of you are inspired to become the best version of yourself.
Mm.
And I was like, yep, that there it is. And I recognize a container where I would be expected or hoped that I'm happy for a partner, making multiple other women orgasm many times
Yeah.
may not create the conditions for me, my best self, to emerge and be inspired.
Mm-hmm. Totally.
So the container you choose does matter. Which container elicits your self energy,
Right.
your potential.
Right. Again, I think about my sisters, the Mormon, like that is not that is not the growth of spiritual development for her culture. And
Yeah,
and
yeah,
and so like honoring the different like truly
yeah.
multicultural humility, honoring the different ways that people have narratives and not to say that one is better than the other, right? And like
Right.
and how do we hold that diversity and what these different things mean to us? I think that's an important piece because we're not more enlightened because we do the psychedelic. You're not more enlightened because you've done non-monogamy. You
Right,
might have
right,
learned a lot about yourself in that
right,
process, but we don't
right.
look at other people and say that's not the way of being. That's absurd. And so
Exactly.
holding that level of space, I think holding the level of change that can happen over a lifetime with
Mhm.
work. That's the
Yeah.
thing is if I heard
Yeah.
one client who was like, I'm waiting to do non-monogamy when it will be easy. And I was like, ha, that's like waiting to run the marathon when you're going to feel in shape. I'm like, good.
Uh,
Yeah, exactly.
do
Looking
you
at your
have your
clock.
your cemetery plot chosen?
Yeah, yeah, totally. So, and
Just
again, I think
kidding.
if we look at the trajectory of it too, kind of like queerness, where you look they look at generational data, and
Mhm.
younger generations are identifying as queer in rates that are astronomical compared to the past. And there's
Mhm.
similar data with non-monogamy where it's like 40% of the youngest generation is saying their ideal relationship is non-monogamous, right? So like
Right.
40% is pretty hefty. So I do think like even let's go out to like when I die, ideally a long life, and like looking at what they're going to be processing, it's going to be a radically different culture. Again, even just the 100 years of
Mhm.
Margaret Sanger. I mean, like,
Yeah. Yes. This is true.
oh, so I hope people like don't get discouraged when things are hard. We don't get discouraged when we are dismantling other forms of oppression that are hard. And
Right.
also, you don't have to have kids. You don't have to do non-monogamy. They are
Yeah.
different climes, and
Yeah.
not you're not more enlightened. People with kids do the same thing. They're like, it's the best thing I've ever done. I can't imagine, and
I
it's like
totally forgot what it was like to want to throw myself at a window at 3 a.m. after no sleep for 3 months. Yeah, I
right. It was
forget.
the best thing when I was crying on my face about him
And I was
having
like,
sex with other
can I
people.
put it back in?
Totally,
Right, right.
totally,
So easy to
right?
forget. Well,
Totally.
one of the things you said just now that jumped out
Yeah.
is, this younger generation of where 40% are
Yeah.
interested in some form of consensual non-monogamy. How interesting that that lines up at least with Jessica's projection of the 40% of cheating, right? So
Right.
it's like, what's the
Yeah.
name that we're giving the behavior, So maybe it's not a species-wide flaw.
Yeah.
Maybe not.
Yeah. I call it love. I call it love. So I'll be
Yeah.
here for that frame. Yeah.
Yeah.
Well, I want to hold a little bit of space as we come towards the end of our time. I always take a deep breath
Hmm.
and then just check in to see if there is anything else that you wanted to share with the listeners. Otherwise, I can guide us towards our closing question.
Great. Uh, what I just want to share is whichever way you are feeling, you're not alone.
Yeah.
And the moment we want to project perfection on others and turn that around to mean something about us, I want you to know that there's one person right here that has face planted so spectacularly so many times
Yep.
that when you know there's one person out there, you're not alone.
Yeah, you can make that too.
Yep.
Yeah. Mm. Well, if you feel good, I'll guide us towards our closing
Yeah, let's
question.
do it.
Okay. So, the one question that I ask everybody is, what is one thing that you wish other people knew was more normal?
Mm. I wish people knew that feeling like you have a identity crisis or multiple personality disorder is actually quite normal and it's just parts. And to move away from a paradigm of monocentrism that you are one thing and you should be one thing and you should feel one way and you should do it this way and everything else is wrong. Rather, see a split or a conflict inside not as another character flaw, but simply an inquiry to begin an exploration.
Mhm.
That's what I wish people knew were normal.
Curiosity. Yeah.
Curiosity. That's the signal of self.
Right. I'm curious because I feel torn in two opposite directions. Let's get
Yeah.
curious before I panic.
Yes. Yes.
Yeah.
In the parts work that I do, there's multiple qualities of self, but the one standout where I know that my client is in self prepared to engage with their part is if they are curious to know more.
Yeah. Yeah. You're not in the fight, flight, freeze, fawn. You're in the prefrontal cortex of
Right.
curiosity and
Exactly.
unpacking. Yeah. And I think the one thing I wanted to hit on too is the impact of community. We've talked about that in a lot of different ways with whether it's like how your partner's responding, the examples that we see in the narratives and lived experience of other lives. But man, your community impacts your parts. I think we even think
Mm.
of, we know that, but I don't know if we fully comprehend how much so, because we'll easily look back and be like, yeah, my parents, this is how, and this. But I'm like, your whole concept of self is impacted by all of the people that you are surrounding yourself with, right? And
That's right.
so holding that sort of context when we're thinking about our parts of maybe I need more community that is supportive of this vision and these value
Right.
systems. Maybe I need to get away from some of these others, and like really holding the influence
Mhm.
of that, I think is pretty life changing, and immediately pulls us out of the individual, which I'm so sick of, like literally the field of psychology trying to recreate the concepts of hard science and Newtonian physics to like, man, we got to rewrite this now that we know quantum mechanics and how the
Mhm.
systems impact us. It is wild for us to think about the individual psyche. I'm like, your individual psyche is a reflection of your
I
situation,
know. We're
my
just a
friend.
node in a
Yeah.
network. Yeah.
Yeah, and we have the power to change to some degree. I can't get off this planet, but I can kind of change who, you know what I mean though?
Yeah.
Like truly,
Yeah.
like
Yeah.
this is my consciousness based on here, like,
Yeah.
but I
There's a
can ch
particle dimension to a degree that we have. We do live in some construct of physics.
and how that impacts me, like feeling the need to wear clothes everywhere because that's what, lots of human nudist camps, different world, exactly, right?
Yeah.
Example, different community. So just thinking about how that shapes all of us, I think that will help people to get more critical about both what they feel is innate and
Mhm.
also just their concept of self. When God, when clients are so self-deprecating and all these things, my
Oh, I know.
immediate
It's very
question
hard.
is, who told you this?
Right. Who
Who
taught you
told
that?
you? Society, a friend, a lover, a partner, a parent? Who told you that?
Right.
Ugh,
Exactly.
yeah.
And, what I'll leave with is a little tidbit.
Yeah.
I discovered the four agreements.
So good.
Um, I'm forgetting, my brain is offline, so I'm forgetting his name.
Yeah.
But when I really worked to try to examine and integrate, I don't implement them from a way of bypassing the very real trauma that is going to put me out of line with the four agreements. And those are agreements like watch what you say, don't take things personally. That's
That's
a
my
big one.
favorite one. Yeah.
And don't make assumptions. So,
Uh-huh.
like these often show up in our interpersonal communications. So,
Yeah.
what I'm working to do, and it's not the easiest in the kind of environment I live in and who I'm, there you go.
And always do your best.
Always do your
That was
best
the last
even
one. I
when
was
you
like, I
don't do
think
your
I have a
best.
post-it note of them.
Yep. And do your best to accept yourself when you don't do your best. I love
Yes.
that. And then be skeptical of everything you hear, but listen with an open heart. And for me,
Mm,
that is actually the core of parts work
yeah.
is you are not believing the story that you're hearing, but you are engaging with love and an open heart of the story it originated in, which was real and the very real feelings. And what I'm working to do is how much community can I cultivate that's close enough to these agreements?
Yeah. Beautiful.
That will keep you on course without
Yes.
bypassing your emotions.
Right. You can't feel the pleasure if you can't cry
That's
in the
right.
morning and the loss of it all.
That's right.
Yeah.
Kitty agrees.
It has been such a joy to connect with you and to just co-create this very radical conversation that I think is so expansive about pleasure and the liberation of our desires and really the
Mm.
future of relationships.
Yes, it is an uncertain but interesting future ahead for sure. But there's so
Yeah,
many people breaking the chains of so many centuries now we're doing that it is an exciting time to be on that
absolutely.
curve.
Absolutely. Yeah, it's
Hmm.
it's truly a joy.
And thank you. The work that you do is so powerful, especially for women. I love to see when women, especially, lead as voices in the world of
Mm,
non-monogamy, especially where I've certainly wavered on my role in all of that. But I absolutely love to see women setting that stage and showing a path of safety and care and
yeah.
nourishment along with expansion and freedom.
Mm, yeah, I deeply appreciate that. We're all pulling different parts of the threads, right? And so my journey right now without kids is very different than yours. And so we
Hmm.
speak to very different perspectives, and both are so, so needed. So I'm really thankful to have been in this space with you.
Yeah, same. Thank you so much for the
Yeah,
opportunity.
of course. I'm thinking too about all of the people who have been listening and really want to connect with you and more of your teachings. Where can they find you?
Sure. So my main website is leadawnlove.com. So LeaDawnLove. And on that website, that's the main place to learn more about me as an attachment and parts work coach. I deal with empowerment issues, victimization, polarity, infidelity, really anything that affects like trust, empowerment, attachment. So you're welcome to check me out there. I have a blog with some resources. I'm also ramping up my efforts on Instagram. So leah.dawn.love on Instagram. And for now, yeah, that's where you can connect.
Great. I'll have all of that in the show notes below so that listeners can just find your stuff and connect with you right away. So
Great.
Thank you for coming on the show today.
Thank you. It's been such a pleasure.
If you enjoyed today's episode, then leave us a 5-star review wherever you listen to your podcast. And head on over to modernanarchypodcast.com to get resources and learn more about all the things we talked about on today's episode. I want to thank you for tuning in, and I will see you all next week.